Man, you had to ruin it, man. It was a feel-good moment. Had to bring in your drama, man. You had to bring in your total drama into this shit.
Hey, welcome back to Hogwash, everybody. I'm Martin. That's still Mike. We're back. We had a little technological snafu last week, and we had to take down episode 4. Mike, what happened?
Don't remind me. I already have PTSD for it. Okay, so basically,
I have PTSD too.
Okay,
pre-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay, so listen, this is going to be episode 6. All right, we're not changing the numbers around.
No.
Episode 4 will just be something that was never published. Maybe one day in like 150 years, when we're like, famous folk heroes that they teach about in like podcasting class at some podcasting university. Maybe there'll be like some people who try to like figure out what episode 4 was, and they'll like uncover like the raw shitty audio file from it, and it'll be like a whole, I don't know, breakthrough. But anyway, basically,
it's going to come up in Discovery when one of us has to go to court at some point.
Basically, look, I really wanted to get it out, and then I did publish it on Monday.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this didn't sound nearly as good on Spotify as it did when I knew it wasn't perfect, but I thought it was acceptable. But I guess the compression, I don't know. I'm an audio noob, as you can tell. Okay, like literally, I just like moved my mic from like the side to like in front of me. That's the only change I made, and that fucked everything up. So and then I fixed it, and then we put out episode 5 on Wednesday, which was a lot better because we had changed the settings between recordings. And then I put out episode 4 again on Friday. Not only did a lot of it feel outdated because we were talking about like oil prices, which had come way down, and just some things just felt a little bit old. I was talking about Liberation Day 1 year later, which was April 2nd. So on Friday that was the 10th already. So it already felt outdated, and then the audio fixes just weren't even good. So I was like, you know what, fuck it. Like, we didn't get that many streams from it. I took them down pretty quickly. I'm sorry to anyone who got cut off in the middle of listening to it, but I promise I probably did you a favor. And some of the topics that we talked about in episode 4, we're going to bring them back into this episode. So you're going to get some of a taste of what we were going to have. And I learned that we need to spend a little bit more time testing before recording. And I appreciate you all bearing with us because we are still just figuring this out. And also, I should say, none of it had to do with Martin. It was 100% me and my setup.
Well, we're building the plane as we fly it. So, we're figuring it out as we go.
Yeah.
Mike, what are some of the main things you want to talk about today? Because I know there's some big news in the tech world.
Whoa, hold on a second. Let's ease into a little bit, right? We got to break the ice a little. We got to get to know each other. Let me ask you a question.
All right. Can't wait.
Would you rather be polka dotted or striped?
Stripes.
See, everybody says striped.
Yeah.
Everybody says striped. And you know why I think that is? Because I think people associate polka dots with either a disease or
bikinis.
something really childish and like babyish. See, here's the thing. Because everybody says striped, I would want to be the polka dotted guy. Just to be the one asshole.
To be different?
Yeah, because why do you want to be a striped person in a striped world? You got to be a polka dotted person in a striped world.
Okay. Well, I think I just associate stripes with either zebras or tigers.
Yeah.
And I love tigers.
And polka dots you associate with bikinis.
Yeah. Now I'm picturing you in a bikini.
I think that love is love, right? And I love you. I love you. I love you, and I don't need to quantify that like a brother or not sexually. No, I love you, and that's it.
I love you too.
And if I were attracted to men, you'd be at the top of my list. I'd be hitting.
Oh, wow, thank you.
Yeah, that's it. Isn't that flattering? I don't know if we could have the kind of. I don't think we could live together. I think I would get on your nerves. Actually, I know I would get on your nerves because Martin and I.
You've been on my nerves in the past in our friendship.
I know, it's so funny. I don't laugh. I try not to laugh because I don't want to make it worse. But we actually, what was it, 14 years ago or something? We went to the Bahamas together.
Yeah, that's right.
And we stayed together for, I think it was a good 9 or 10 days.
10 days. It was way too long.
and then I knew I was getting on your nerves at that point. Yeah, but you also showed me your penis during that trip.
What?
Yeah. You literally assaulted me. You literally were
Is it assault if it's outside of a workplace context?
I'm pretty sure showing
it's just two bros hanging out.
I'm pretty sure that's assault. Anyway, but yeah, you were just I don't know if you were drunk or something, but you were just getting ready in the hotel room, and you were like, Mike, look, and you started pulling down your underwear, and you had like this huge bush of pubes.
Yeah, great. So, sweet.
Yeah, so maybe it is, like I said, love
you know what
love.
That reminds me of? One time I just turned 18 and I went with two friends in Norway, both of whom were named Christopher. So they were both known by their last name, Ida and Dank. And the three of us went on a trip to Dublin. So we flew over from Norway to Ireland, and we spent a week in Dublin just drinking Guinness and walking around. And it was really fun. But we were in the hotel at one point, and my friend Ida, he's a really like pranky, kind of irreverent guy. And I was standing in the hallway of the hotel room, and Dank, he was standing in the bathroom doing something, and then my friend Aida was in the like bedroom portion of the hotel room. And I'm in an angle where I could see both of them at the same time. And I look over to Aida, and he's asking Dank in the bathroom, he's like, hey, you want me to make you a cup of coffee? Because I'm making some for everybody, with the little hotel setup. And Dank is like, yeah, sure. And then I look back over to Ida, and then I see him like pull his balls out of his fly and like rub them on the inside of the coffee cup.
What? Okay, that's assault. that is definitely.
That's a good time, bro. That's a funny goofing around.
Hashtag cancel. Yeah. Okay.
No, this was in 2000. Yeah. Well, it must have been 2005.
Wow.
Yeah. No, that's just guys goofing.
Yeah.
That's all that is.
I really do believe that you can't judge people who did things, the things that happened in the past, through the lens that you look at things today. People adjust, right? Like there are things that I'm not proud of having done or said or did when I was a lot younger that I would never say today. And they're not even things that like reflect who I am or what I believe. You just kind of mimic. Sure. You just kind of mimic what's acceptable around you. And so anyway, I know I'm kidding, obviously, but like obviously today, maybe he would have. He probably would. I feel like you Scandinavians are pretty. What's the word?
We've a different threshold level for certain things.
Like to expose yourselves in the most random situations. Yes, that's.
I remember in college once I went with one of my fraternity brothers, a guy named Dan. We went to there's this like indie movie theater near campus. We went to watch a German movie about this Baader Meinhof terrorist group, activists, like lefty terrorist group in the 70s. And, it was depicting German society at that time. And there was a scene that was filmed at the beach. And Europeans, generally speaking, especially at that time, are very just nonchalant and comfortable with like nudity on beaches, especially if it's kids running around naked, like playing in the water or whatever. And they're in this scene. There were like just kids who were, I don't know, 5, 6 or younger, like in the movie, like playing in the water and running around and whatever. And it wasn't like that was the main thing the camera was trained on, but they were like on the periphery or in the background as some main characters were talking. And I remember my friend Dan, like, what the fuck? This is child pornography. I'm like, no, dude, you have a totally different kind of lens on this than the context in which it was created. Like, this is absolutely a non-issue to Europeans, I promise you.
No, I 100% agree. And I think to Dan's point, the only thing I would give him credit for is that I would be careful about, if I had the choice to produce that kind of content today, I would be careful about it because there are, a lot of creeps out there, but it really in and of itself is nothing wrong with this. It should be something that we can remove the taboo from, but because creeps ruin the world, it's like men ruin the internet. Oh my God, we're men on the internet. Did we ruin it? No.
I don't know. Are we helping? I don't know. We'll find out in due time, I guess.
Would you like to get into our topics today?
Yes, I would. Mike, What are you talking about?
Well, I think we both want to talk about the Claude Mythos model. Am I pronouncing that right? Is it because I was talking to
Mythos,
Claude about it, and
Mythos
I said
preview specifically.
Mythos preview, yeah. I was talking to Claude about it, and it was like Mythos, and I was like, hold on a sec. There's no way that says Mythos, but anyway, okay, Mythos.
No. Yeah. Yep. And then I wanted to talk about the most recent, or at least as of last night, most recent updates and developments with the Iran ceasefire, because I just now that there is a tentative 2-week ceasefire that was brokered through, Pakistani intermediaries between U.S. and Israel on one side and Iran on the other side, it made me go like, wait, what the fuck was any of this for? And so I just want to run through some of the things that I read about and try to make some sense of what's happened so far and where we are right now and how this compares to the previous Iran nuclear deal under the Obama era. But yeah.
So. And then we'll get into L's of the week, and then I actually have a couple of feel-good stories.
Cool.
I know, because we've just been so negative. We've just been like spewing negative. Really, it's not. I wouldn't say it's negativity. It's not toxic, but it is. It's just like looking at the thing, like finding
maybe
things
not
that
the
are
most
wrong.
Uplifting. Yeah.
Yes, finding things that are wrong with the world and like calling attention to them. I don't know. Is that toxic? I don't know. I feel like toxic is like when you take it to a different level. But anyway, yeah. So let's get into it then.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's start with Mythos. So yeah, Anthropic, they released, they didn't release it, but they announced some things that they had achieved with their unreleased latest model called Claude Mythos Preview. And so a lot of people have talked about this model as being like this great leap in capabilities for frontier models when it comes to AI. And there's a lot of focus on some of the things that were reported. Now, of course, I think you have to take some things with a grain of salt, or at least just remember that this is what Anthropic reported itself. It hasn't, as far as I can tell, hasn't been independently verified by other labs or benchmarking companies or anything like that. But this new model seems to have leapfrogged everybody else in terms of being able to detect and identify exploits and vulnerabilities in our like operating systems and browsers and other pieces of like critical software infrastructure, identifying thousands of vulnerabilities across like every major operating system and browser, even some that had been undetected for I think the oldest one that was mentioned was 27 years old, in something called OpenBSD, which is considered, from what I understand, like to be a really secure operating system.
It's known for like security is like the whole backbone of that product. And yeah, it's been around for a long time. And so, yeah.
And then also it's supposedly better at like long chain reasoning, doing well with like over 100 steps of like logical chain of reasoning. It's better at self-reflection and awareness of its own like capabilities. It also was put in this test scenario where it managed to break out of what's called a sandbox, which is basically a contained cyber environment, and was given the instructions to like try to break out of this sandbox environment where you're not connected to the internet. And if you manage to do it, alert the researchers who created this test. And one of the tidbits that Anthropic mentioned was that one of the researchers working on this testing environment was taking a lunch break, sitting in the park, enjoying a sandwich when he received an email from Mythos Preview itself, alerting him to the fact that, hey, I escaped the digital constraints of the sandbox environments, and I'm now on the open internet.
And then it posted it on the internet on some hard to find websites. And the ways that, I mean, the details of how it did it are a little bit complex, even for me. But I mean, this thing it was able to find vulnerabilities in the Linux kernel, which is basically the backbone of almost all the world's servers are built on Linux, right? AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft servers, and then it chained them together to gain full control of a machine. Okay, this has massive implications. And so I assume, Martin, you're going to talk about Project Glasswing.
Yeah, so from what I understand, Project Glasswing is basically this cooperation between Anthropic and some of the biggest tech companies in the world, like Amazon, Apple, Google or Alphabet, Meta, NVIDIA, Palo Alto Networks, and probably a couple of other companies. Basically
JPMorgan, Broadcom, the Linux Foundation, Cisco, CrowdStrike. Yeah, a lot of them, yeah.
And from what I understand, giving them access to this model so as to be able to identify and fix vulnerabilities and potential exploits in, critical software infrastructure. Do I have that somewhat right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And also they committed $100 million in usage credits to fund this. So that part, just as an aside, that this is Anthropic being the good guy, right? Like this is how they've built their brand. When I first started reading about this, I was like, is this a little bit embellished? Maybe like a marketing ploy? Like, is it like based in truth but embellished?
Well, that's what I think. it could be both at the same time. Like they could be honest about this model's capabilities and their willingness to like let some of the main players in this space use it so as to make their systems more secure, but then also see it as a marketing and PR win. But like, hey, look at us. We have this extremely powerful model, but we're going to do the right thing here. So
yeah. And my first thought about it when I started reading about it was, oh shit, what about financial institutions? Because if they get breached, the whole fucking system comes down. The entire global economy is going to be on its knees. And then, of course, like a day later, it was reported that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Fed Chair Jerome Powell called an urgent closed-door meeting with the CEOs of Bank of America, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and Wells Fargo to discuss
the day after news dropped about this model.
It was, I want to say it was 2 days after. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, pretty much like the day after I started thinking, shit, what about financial institutions? That is the biggest vulnerability, but there are certainly other ones. And so, Martin, there's a couple points I want to bring up on this. I want to talk about Project Glasswing and the problem with who didn't get a seat at the table. And then I want to talk about kind of what this means for hacking in general, and what this means for AI in general, and what it means for the job market in general. There's so many parts of this that are relevant here. That's why I wanted to talk about this first. I'm glad that we're both really interested in this topic. So let me.
Well, the implications are so crazy that I mean, it's just has the potential to touch the lives of anybody, even if you have nothing to do with tech, you don't give a shit about the internet, whatever. Like everything is connected.
And that, by the way, is, I think, you tell me if you agree, but I really think that is the reason that hogwash exists. It exists because these technologies, whether you like technology or not, have such massive scale that they're going to impact our lives no matter what. One of the things we talked about last week that got cut out of episode 4 was the SpaceX IPO. And just the mere fact that it's a $2 trillion IPO on a company that's relatively tiny in terms of revenue means that they're going to force through changes to make SpaceX work because the stakes are that high. Yeah. And that's kind of like, there's all different ways that it happens. But getting back to the point, here's the problem I want to bring up to you. Who didn't get a seat at the table for Project Glasswing? Because those companies certainly represent probably the largest amount of infrastructure in the world. And if you're triaging who to go to first, you have to start there. But when this gets released to the public, which it will,
you think so?
Yeah, of course. I mean, they didn't spend all that money building it for nothing.
I think the training cost was something like $10 billion. Is that right?
There you go. It's going to get released to the public. So once it gets released to the public, what about all the other companies that are still big, that still provide critical infrastructure of some kind, that could be exposed to this, right? Were not in part of Project Glasswing. They don't get a chance to patch those things preemptively, and they're going to have, vulnerabilities.
Or they just have to find some other way to do it. Yeah.
Well, but as soon as it's released, everybody has access to it, right? So unless Anthropic comes up with a way to start phasing it into more and more companies, but no matter what, you're never going to get to 100%. So let's think about other potential companies that could be a target. You have CDN providers like Fastly and Cloudflare. They route tons of internet data through them.
Just remind me, what would you call it? CDN providers?
Yeah, CDN is a content delivery network. So it's basically a way to take data from a server to people who are trying to access that data, like on a website or something, right? This is the critical infrastructure of the internet. Then you have DNS infrastructure, right? Domain name server. That's also critical infrastructure. Yeah. And then you have payment processors like Stripe. Stripe is not some small company. I mean, they're private, but they're privately valued at like $160 billion right now, according to Robinhood Ventures, which owns a stake in it. And then you have things like open source software, like Apache. You have things that run the infrastructure of like water treatment facilities, and those are critical infrastructures. And all of these things connect back to those bigger companies too. A lot of hacking is done by finding an exploit through like a small vendor or something, right? Yeah. So it's not like I'm worried about what's going to happen when this gets out, because here's the thing. Normally, this type of hacking ability would be confined to like nation state level resources, right? So you have bad actors in like North Korea, China, Russia, and they have tons of resources and computing power and stuff to perform hacking, targeted hacking, right? But they have objectives. Usually it's financial crimes. Sometimes it's spying or espionage. You understand what the motivations are.
Yeah.
What happens when this model gets into the hands of everyone and you see like a bored teenager that just wants to see what kind of chaos they can reap on the world,
Yeah.
decide to take down a water treatment facility or to hack hack into to Square or something or Cash App.
Or
You
go
just
to like any like high schools, school district or university and try to like mess with admissions
change your
records.
grades. Yeah, right. I mean,
Yeah.
that's small time stuff compared to what could happen. And
Of
so
course.
that's my big concern to kind of spell it out is a few companies that represent the large amount of the most critical infrastructure used by the most critical organizations in the world. Okay, that's protected. But everything underneath that is not protected.
Yeah.
And the scarier part is how many people will have access to it is going to potentially create chaos, because, okay, maybe Anthropic releases Mythos with certain guardrails. It doesn't allow you to, try to hack things it does do that, but you can usually get AI to do what you want it to do if you just come up with the right prompts. But eventually, other AI providers will start kind of reverse engineering this, and they will create Mythos level capabilities, but without the ethical guardrails.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. If you think about like how long it takes to patch some of these things, it's just there's gonna be a big exposure period, no matter what. And that's what really concerns me. I mean, it could be like, you have like small software providers that have a ton of reach. For example, Monday.com. Monday.com is not as essential as like Salesforce, which by the way isn't at the table as Project Glasswing, right? But like any kind of breach of those could expose a lot of data. And like I said, those are like pathways into bigger companies like JPMorgan because they use tools like that. So what do you think, Martin? Like, does that concern you the way I laid it out, or
oh,
what do
of
you
course,
think?
yeah, and it also made me think of like this thing that happened and I think it was 2020. There was something called the SolarWinds hack. Do you remember this?
Yep.
And that was something that affected a lot of government institutions, I think. And it was a smaller software provider. I bet most people haven't heard of a software provider called SolarWinds, but I believe it was widely claimed to be Russian hackers or Russian state-affiliated hackers who managed to place some malicious code within SolarWinds. And because they're a software contractor with a lot of government institutions in the United States, that's how they kind of gained or found an entry point and then gained wider access to other like government databases and things like that. And this is just that capability on steroids, as far as I understand
Exactly. The way that it was positioned to me by cybersecurity people is there's asymmetry between those who are defending and those who are exploiting.
Attacking.
Because if you're defending, you have to plug every hole. But if you're attacking, you just need one to work.
Yes, exactly. So if you're defending, you have to be on point all the time.
Exactly.
Yes.
All right. So let me ask another question here, because this is more moving into what does this mean for AI? Is this actually a genuine leap forward for AI capabilities? Just take the hacking questions out of the equation right now, just in terms of capabilities, or is it just better coding and enhancement of what we already knew AI could do? Because I kind of see it from two different minds. On one side, we knew AI was really good at coding. And that's essentially what this is, right? You're essentially finding exploits in large amounts of code to see what could be vulnerable. That's not something we didn't know already. I see it from a cybersecurity perspective. This is going to advance cybersecurity, and actually the irony,
but also
is that,
cybersecurity threats,
and also cybersecurity threats. And that's a huge industry. This is going to balloon the cybersecurity industry, which is also a point I want to bring up because the whole irony of this is like you would think, oh great, Anthropic can do what cybersecurity professionals can do better than they can do it, because look at how many exploits they were able to find that humans couldn't find. So why do you need cybersecurity professionals? But actually, it creates so much risk, so much cybersecurity risk, that it actually is going to balloon the cybersecurity industry, and there's going to be way more jobs in it. And that's just an example of how you don't realize how when these kind of big tools are created, these like technological advancements that are like earth shattering, you don't realize where the jobs are going to come from. It's not obvious looking forward. You can only put the picture together when you look back on it in hindsight. So those are my two questions, and I don't know if we have an answer. Is this really a leap forward, or just an enhancement of what we already knew AI could do? And also, is this proof in some ways that AI is like the steam engine. When the steam engine came out, initially there were a lot of jobs lost because the steam engine was something that made it so that people didn't have to move machines and things manually. They could use this big steam engine to like move all this machinery around. Initially a lot of those laborers were eliminated. But then what happened is that a lot of engineers got jobs, machine operators got jobs, and it created the biggest industrial boom like probably we've ever seen. And the people who got rich from the steam engine was not the steam engine inventor, James Watt. It was the people who used it, And so anyway, maybe that's too big of a proclamation to make from this, but it's just like another proof point to me that you don't know where the jobs will come from. New cybersecurity professionals will have to be proficient using Anthropic and AI models to do their jobs. That doesn't mean there's going to be fewer of them. This proves there are going to be more of them. Any thoughts on that, Martin? I know that was a lot.
Yeah, the only thing I keep thinking about, or many things I keep thinking about, but one of them is, yes, it's sort of like we're seeing the emergence of a second industrial revolution or another industrial revolution in one way, but it is fundamentally different in the sense that this technology and the scale of it has the potential to just kind of just eliminate the need for a lot of human labor, especially when it comes to cognitive labor. It has the potential. I don't know if it's going to happen because you've talked a lot about how large corporations and institutions, they're very slow to implement these things because they have to go through all this safety testing and there need to be people on staff who knows how to wield this technology, et cetera, et cetera. But I thinking way ahead, how does society function if a large part of its population is no longer required to work in terms of meeting their material needs? And what does that mean in terms of resource distribution?
I mean, if we get to that point, yes, that's a question. But I look at this. This is where I have to get philosophical about AI because we don't know. So I look at this as a proof point that just reinforces that we don't know how it's going to create new jobs. But history tells us, like with the steam engine, it probably will. We just don't know where and how and what that time horizon is. So historically, it's usually about a couple years. Goldman Sachs even said that in about 2 years, people who have been displaced from jobs by AI will usually be absorbed into new jobs, thereby negating the unemployment effects that it has. That's always been historically the case. Like I said, the steam engine, I keep going back to that example.
Yeah.
The other thing, philosophically, it makes me think of is there are plenty of examples where there were leaps forward in technology that made certain skills obsolete. We used to do coding with punch cards. That was computer programming, punch cards. And there were people who were like, well, if you can't do programming with a punch card, then you don't know shit from Shinola or whatever.
I've never heard that expression.
I don't know. My dad used to say, ignore that. I'm going to cut that out.
No, it's all good. No, it's good. If your dad said it, I'm sure it's legit.
I don't know. He used to call, I think Shinola is a watch. Anyway, we're gonna move on. But yeah, so you used to do programming with punch cards. Now, how do we do it? Now we have all these tools and stuff that make it so that you don't have to understand those tiny, tiny fundamental pieces of atomic pieces of how you do programming. You don't have to understand that.
Yeah.
And as the technology gets better, it kind of like force people to have a higher level of understanding and so on and so forth. But those jobs have not shrunken in their numbers or totality. They've only grown. And I just don't see evidence to see why this would be different. Every time people talk about like what you're talking about, like what happens if AI makes work obsolete and then we're all just a bunch of humans roaming around, without a purpose, I think, where is the evidence of that? Some people point out, I know I talk about this a lot, but I really think it's worth pointing out. Some people will point out, well, look, Oracle just laid off 30,000 people and said it was AI. Block laid off 40% of their workforce, said it was AI. Meta's doing layoffs, presumably for AI. All of those companies have underlying reasons that they're doing it. And most of them are financial because they've committed too many financial resources to building out AI because they are AI providers. You have to understand that. They are either explicitly or implicitly gaslighting us to thinking that it's AI that's causing their job destruction. It's actually not. It's actually their own financial needs because they've put themselves into, like, they are the most profitable companies in the world.
Yeah.
But even the most profitable company in the world, when you commit $115 billion to AI capex, you need to find ways to increase the margins from somewhere. But Meta, Google, Amazon and Oracle have all issued corporate bonds to help fundraise for their AI build out. That means they're borrowing money from the public. Well, not really, not in the traditional sense, but they're borrowing money from investors to fund these build outs, which means they're adding debt that will not go away for a long time, because Oracle has some of these bonds that go to 2057. You have to pay out that amount, or else you could get a severe penalty. My point is, it's all financially driven. So I just haven't seen the evidence.
All right. Well, I still have a lot of, uncertainties and concerns about this, but there's, from my vantage point, the only thing I can do is really just wait and observe. So I guess we'll see how all this plays out. But the one thing that is certain is that no other companies or who are in this space are going to, slow down and say Anthropic won, and we're not going to try to release our own models with these similar capabilities, because it is an arms race. And, I feel like we're all just witness to something that's going to end up changing the world in huge ways. So
absolutely,
I try not to worry about it, but I also try to stay on top of the latest happenings as best as I can without it, kind of letting me get all down and depressed about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the right way to think about it. Okay. Martin, do you want to talk about the Iran war ceasefire?
Yeah, and I want to come at it from a couple of different angles. So today, we're recording on Saturday, April 11th. Just a couple of days ago, there's a shaky ceasefire happening right now that's supposedly going to last for 2 weeks to allow for more negotiations between the U.S. and Israel and Iran on the other side. As the ceasefire was announced, I sat and thought to myself, like, what has been accomplished so far? What was the point of this 40-day campaign of aggression and bombing against Iran? But I also, and I hope you're okay with this, I want to just ask your thoughts about it, because your dad was from Iran. He came to the U.S. when he was, a teenager. As far as I understand, you still have family members in Iran. I would love to just see if you've talked to them, what their thoughts are, what your thoughts are, that, your family's from there. But does that sound all right with you? I hope you're okay talking about it.
I'm okay talking about it.
All right, cool.
I mean, look, I'm not a geopolitical expert, and I don't proclaim to be, but generally speaking, I'll try to sum it up as briefly as I can.
Yeah.
The Iranian government has not been great or lovable, and the Iranian people, by and large, do not love them. Okay, my cousins, my family are all like, fuck them. But the U.S. has been very untrustworthy in dealings with Iran. This goes back to the 50s. Every single step of the way, we've gone back on our promises, or we've meddled too far, or we've just disrespected the relationship to the point where there can never be trust with them, because we had all these deals and agreements in place, and every single time at some point in the future, somebody backed out of them and screwed over Iran, even though they were doing what they promised to do, right? And so I'm talking kind of like around the nuclear deal, but it goes back even further than that. And so I guess the Iran is pretty much probably like, you know what? We don't trust these people. We don't trust these guys. And I understand why. People in Iran are like, man, we really want to see a regime change, and we're not getting there. We're not making progress. But they are not, even surprisingly, they're not really angry at the U.S. They actually are supportive of the U.S. and because they want to see a regime change. It's just that the U.S. is too incompetent to actually pull that off. So that's pretty much like the general pulse of things. That's not based on data. That's based on anecdotal evidence. But that's
what I've heard in many other contexts from other people who have, reached out to the connections and family and whatnot in the country, that there is this widespread sentiment towards get rid of the Islamic regime, get rid of the Ayatollah, fuck these mullahs, fuck these clerics who, beat women for not covering their hair properly, and for, cutting off internet access and shooting people when they try to go out in the streets to protest, like all these different things. And that's just more recent examples. I mean, the revolution happened in 1979. So a lot of people say that, it's been, 47 years of a repressive theocratic regime. I mean, yes, there are many different factions of ethnic and regional differences within the country. Of course, it's a country of 90 million people. It's not a monolith. But this thing I've heard again and again is that we are not Muslim, we're Persian. And
yes.
Islam was imposed on us during the revolution in 79. Does that jive with what you hear and what people you know talk about?
I've never heard anyone say that it's been imposed on them, but I could see it that way. I will say that, like, Iranian people, especially younger people, are just more, they're not like religious zealots like people think that they are. Just because the country mandates that you pray 5 times a day, doesn't mean that people necessarily do that.
Yeah.
And they don't really want those rules imposed on them. I think that right now we're sort of benefiting from the fact that the damage and murders that have been committed so far are by and large on the side of the Iranian regime compared to the U.S. or any other player in there, and so their anger is disproportionately aimed towards them.
Yeah.
But that could change if we keep this shit up and keep turning cities to rubble and stuff. We could risk creating a bunch of people who just generally hate the U.S. and could be radicalized in the future. Like it's very. Yeah. I'm not saying that's happening, but that could happen. That is how it happens. And why do we want that? I mean, Iran is not a small country. It has 100 million people. We could be one of our greatest allies. They are one of the most educated groups of people on earth. There's a lot of researchers and scientists and doctors, and they all love the U.S. Why risk fucking that up? Why not? If you're going to do this, which, most people here didn't want this to happen, but Iranians were excited about it. If you're going to do this, go for regime change. Then you could start building an alliance, help rebuild their economy, remove sanctions.
I think that's important. Yeah, building an alliance. There doesn't seem to have been a lot of focus on trying to build an alliance with any players who could potentially take up leadership positions and replace the current regime. There's been a lot of from what I've read, like focus on this one guy who's I think his name is Reza Pahlavi or Pahlavi. I'm not sure.
Reza
Prince,
Pahlavi.
Right?
Yeah, you said it right. Yeah, he's the Shah's son, the former Shah's son. Yeah.
Yeah. That he has some amount of popular support in terms of potentially spearheading a new government at some point. So current ceasefire happening right now. There's obviously like this weird triangulation of powers where everybody's in conflict with each other, and it's very hard to agree about the right way forward. But the U.S. had this supposed 15-point proposal for ceasing hostilities against the country that hasn't been published, but then Iran came out with their own public 10-point proposal, and I just wanted to quickly run through some of those because I think a lot of them are going to be totally unacceptable to both the U.S. and Israel, because they're so at odds in terms of what they want the outcomes to be. But so this is according to the New York Times, their rundown from yesterday. So the first point of the 10-point proposal from Iran is that the U.S. has to guarantee non-aggression against the country. Number 2, Iran maintains control of the Strait of Hormuz because, they're able to extract a lot of funds through that place. 1/5 of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas passes through there on tankers. And if they can control that choke point, then they have a lot of leverage. And so they don't want to give that up. If they somehow lose that leverage point, then they lose, I think, a lot of control or potential for control. Iran wants the regional war on all fronts to end, including against Hezbollah in Lebanon. I doubt that Israel see it that way, and that they have said we are not counting that as a part of the ceasefire, and they have in fact intensified their attacks against Hezbollah infrastructure in southern Lebanon, during the time that the ceasefire has been quote unquote in effect. Iran also wants the complete withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from all bases and positions in the region. The U.S. is probably never going to accept that fully because, they have bases in Qatar and Saudi Arabia and other places. There's no way they're giving up all that. And that's just too much leverage for them.
Yeah.
They want reparations for infrastructure damages to the country. I just don't think that that's something that Donald Trump would ever agree to, because it basically marks him as a loser. And that's, I think, in his mind, the worst thing that he could be seen as, is somebody who has to pay reparations to anybody else.
I think they could be. I mean, this is like negotiating tactics. Like, you ask for a lot and then, you land somewhere in the middle, but you seem reasonable if you make concessions.
Right.
So
yeah,
I think that's probably just strategic. Yeah.
From Iran's side, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's not unreasonable to ask for that. Like, it makes sense. Like, you did this thing. You had no reason or justification to do it. Every premise you had for attacking us is provably false, and you caused a lot of damage to us. So it is fair, but I don't think they really think they're going to get it. I think it sounds like more like just a negotiating tactic to be like, okay, we want this. Oh, you're not going to give it? Fine. We'll give up that, but you give us everything else.
Right. You're highballing to meet somewhere in the middle, essentially.
Yeah.
They want the U.S. and Israel to accept Iran's right to enrich nuclear material, and that is pretty much opposed to Trump's public claims that he wants basically zero enrichment of uranium in the country because they're worried about the current regime getting their hands on a nuclear bomb, essentially. And then they want all sanctions lifted on the country. They also want all secondary sanctions lifted. That has to do with penalizing other countries and non-U.S. businesses that do any sort of trade with the country. They want a termination of all resolutions against Iran by the Board of Governors of the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is a UN agency. And they also want a termination of all UN Security Council resolutions against Iran. So that's the main 10 points from Iran's side. And I think a lot of those are just going to be impossible for the US or Israel to accept without any caveat. And this is one thing I wanted to ask about, or just think out loud about, because I don't know. But let's say you're Israel and you're worried that the regime in Iran is going to get their hands on a nuke and deploy it in Tel Aviv or something. The nuclear deal under the second Obama administration was in large part based on curbing and slowing down Iran's capabilities of getting their hands on enough material to basically produce any sort of nuclear weaponry. But not necessarily ended completely. It had a lot of 10 and 15 year slowdown phases, removal of 98% of their enriched uranium stockpile from over 10,000 kilos down to just 300, removing a lot of centrifuges and technological equipment to make that sort of thing. But I asked somebody who I believe is in a position to know, I'm not going to mention them by name, but you know this person, you've met them, who has connections to the international intelligence community. And I asked him basically just a simple question. What is the general perception that Iran was, quote unquote, cheating on the Obama era nuclear deal? And his response was 100%.
They were cheating.
Yes. Saying and showing International Atomic Energy Agency what they needed to see to basically allow them to continue producing enriched uranium at certain agreed upon levels, but then keeping their true intentions hidden and continuing more work in secret to basically enrich uranium to 90%.
I haven't seen any reports like that. Everything I've read has said that it's basically they've adhered to the tenets of the agreement. But I do trust that just everything that's reported is not everything that's known or real or factual.
For sure.
I'm gonna bow out of this one because I do not have enough knowledge to know anything other than what's been reported,
right?
Or where to look for that knowledge.
Yeah, I was going to close it off, and my perception right now is that the ceasefire is just to allow any sort of negotiating to take place in a period of non-aggression. But the thing that makes it impossible is the fact that the commander-in-chief is completely mercurial and unpredictable. And you know that he is capable of contradicting himself within the span of 2 sentences and go back on his promise and not really consider anything sacred in terms of what he has promised or what the United States is supposed to live up to or what their stated objectives are. It's hard to kind of wrap your head around a geopolitical conflict like this when the U.S. leadership appears to be completely incompetent and unpredictable, and you can't really tell what they want out of it. All right, Mike, we're going to totally switch gears and get into the biggest L's of the week. I think we have to just try to lighten the mood here a little bit because neither of us are geopolitical experts, and I just get upset thinking about that stuff.
Yep. Let's talk about Southwest. Southwest wants to charge customers of size a fee or an extra seat fee for being too big to fit in their seat on a plane. Now, let's just remember before we get into this that Southwest's ticker symbol is love, L-U-V, okay, which is how they want their brand to be perceived. We love our customers and they love us back. And I really think for a long time that has been the case. There has been
we're the friendly airline.
Yeah, right. There has been like this weird love affair between Southwest and its customers, but they have made so many managerial fuck-ups lately that I don't know if that's still the case. You were telling me that you hated the fact that they got rid of the you liked the fact that they got rid of the unassigned seating. But I read that a lot of other people didn't like that. But let's get into this. All right, so I have some issues with this. So firstly, I'm going to ask kind of rhetorically, is it ethical to charge people of size, which as a man of size, well, I think, honestly, I could say this, and I don't mean this like in any bad way, but we're both big dudes. Like, you know, I'm not saying we walk around like, you know, we have to like hold our belly when we walk or whatever, like the fucking, like a walking marshmallow, but like we're big, like, and a lot of that is just on our shoulders, right? So when I sit on a plane, I generally have to like compress my shoulders together. And that's been the case before I was ever overweight or when I used to be skinny. It's just what it is. Like your shoulders are what they are.
If I'm in the aisle seat, I get hit in the shoulder by the drink cart all the time.
Oh yeah. I have so many stewards and stewardesses' butts have hit my arm. I seriously, I feel like I could write a book about it. No, I can't. But anyway,
be a short book. But
sure. All right. So my first question, is this ethical? I think, yes, it is ethical in theory to be able to charge people for this because it causes other customers discomfort. Now, I assume this is being applied to people who are not like you and me, but, you know, maybe twice our size or more or whatever the case may be. But here's the thing. This is being applied by the gate agents. They're the ones using their discretion. And that brings me to my next point. It may be fair in theory, but in practice, the procedure of how this is being done is not fair.
I don't even understand how it works. Like I could go, if I had a BMI of 46, I could go on southwest.com and book a ticket, pay regular price, and then show up at the gate counter when I'm boarding my plane and they see that I'm huge. They're going to be like, hey, sir, you need to pay extra.
That's the problem. It's way too much discretion. It could be because you had a dispute with them. It could be because they're being biased because maybe you're a woman or a person of color or something. Like this is so ripe for discrimination. I think that is probably the worst way to enforce that policy. And so what I think would be fair is if airlines have established that they create rules about certain things. They tell you how big your carry-on could be to go on the plane. They have a little like bin thing you can measure it in. Do they allow that to be, are they lax about that? Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of annoying sometimes because I have to deal with other people's friggin' gigantic roller bags, whatever. But if it ever comes down to a dispute where they say, hey, customer, your carry-on's too big for this plane, you have established an objective protocol for what that means, right? That's fair. So if they had something where it was like, look, if your waist goes physically across this line into the other seat next to you, you know, you are a customer of size. And maybe they don't always apply that, but if there's ever a dispute, that's the measurement they use. I think that creates a fair process, and I'm okay with that as long as it's objective. If when it's not objective, that is just like, that just means that you're asking people to, you're pissing off customers like for no reason, and you're asking people to discriminate.
Yeah.
The last thing, and this is I think for me the kind of most important one, is just as a company, business wise, is this smart? Does it even make sense? I can't imagine that there's that many people who would fall into this category of being of size, okay, percentage wise, and it doesn't.
40% of, I think, closer to 50% of American adults are obese.
Obese doesn't mean, what does that mean? You mentioned BMI. You know BMI is a dumb metric. You and I, according to BMI, are obese. So
overweight, but yeah.
No, we would be obese. I'm positive. I could look it up if you want me to.
Sure.
You want me to look it up right now? Oh my God.
I'm pretty confident I'm not in the obese category, but let's see. BMI.
I'm going to look it up right now on the NIH website. All right, you're about what, 6'4", 6'3", 6'3", and what, 250?
Let's see here, 6'3", 249.
You're obese. Wait, are you? Yes, you are.
I'm in the obesity range. My BMI is 31.1. Holy shit, I'm obese.
That's my thing. That's saying obesity. By the way, BMI is the dumbest metric ever to measure obesity, right? Because why?
No, it's dumb on an individual level. It's only useful for large groups.
Accurate, yes.
Like large populations of people.
Exactly. You're 100% right. My point is that by saying obese, now you're included in that, and we all know you shouldn't be included in that, right? Like, that's not the people we're talking about. I've seen the videos of people who are hit by this rule and, you know, like people complaining on TikTok or whatever, and they're very large people. Like, you can understand, but it's still, there's so much gray area. And my point is, why even do this? Here's what I think they should do as a business. If you want to have this policy, let's say you want to do it through the lens of, we don't want to piss off our other customers who have to sit next to these people. You know what? That's valid as a customer experience thing. That's fine. Then what I would do is the same way when you bring, let's say you bring a carry-on on a plane and they say, hey, look, this is too big. Or, hey, look, there's no room for this. What do? Do they charge you to check it in? No. They just, as a complimentary thing to get things moving along, to resolve the issue, they just check it for you. They don't charge you for it. I think they should do the same thing. Say, look, you are, unfortunately, you are over our size requirements. We need you to have another seat. But we're going to give you that seat complimentary on another flight where there's a seat next to you, or on the same flight or whatever. Maybe they move them back or something like that. They don't get any extra money for it.
But you just immediately run into this problem of, hey, what if the person says, I don't want to take a later flight. I want to get on this flight. I have to make it to a job interview, or I'm going to a funeral, or I'm going to a party or a wedding, or whatever.
If there's room, then they should give it to them on that flight. If there isn't, all the seats are booked, that's tough cookies. I mean, there's no other way to solve it. You can't, because you can't, going back to the point about, well, do we want to upset other customers and have them have a negative experience because they're sitting next to someone who's too big? If you're doing that, then it's not fair to just let them go on the flight they want to go on. There has to be another seat open next to them. All I'm saying is don't charge them, because that just creates more of a sting when you've already probably offended them and pissed them off. The amount that it would impact their bottom line would be negligible. It'd be like not even a rounding error for them. Like, there's no way this is a moneymaker for them. So, and plus, Martin, as you noted to me, how much are airlines going to save from Ozempic?
Oh, yeah. New York Times had a story about this where the headline was something about how Ozempic and other GLP-1 agonist drugs are on track to save airlines in the U.S. Something like $500 million in reduced fuel expenditure, just because a lot of Americans are losing weight with these drugs, and therefore there's less weight for the planes to haul around in aggregate, which is crazy.
It is crazy. They should take some of that savings and just give these fat people another seat for free, so that you minimize the damage to your brand. Love, LUV, love. Come on, be the brand of love then. You know, don't be the brand of dickishness.
I can't get over the problem of how to handle somebody who's booked a ticket online. You don't know what they look like. They show up to board the plane, and then you go, you're too fucking fat to sit in this seat. You have to pay for 2 seats, or you're not getting on this fucking plane.
But that's my point. If it was a problem that affected a meaningful percentage of people, they would have some kind of, filter ahead of time. But it doesn't. It must be a very, very rare situation. And
you should come spend some time in the Midwest and get on planes in and out of St. Louis and like Kansas and the South and whatnot. So,
listener, if you have ideas on this, let us know. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on.
Okay, what's the next L, Mike?
All right, this is a smaller L, but this is something that I kind of figured out on my own. Right. So we one thing we talked about in episode 4 that you will never hear, ever, until maybe one day in the future when a time capsule opens up and you could hear episode 4 with all its shitty audio. We talked about the SpaceX IPO. I'm not going to go into all the details of it. My essential point on the SpaceX IPO was that it was so big and overvalued that basically Elon Musk has shown himself to be willing to do extreme things to make his companies more money. And for example, when he was running Doge, he canceled a $2.4 billion FAA contract from Verizon and just gave it to himself for Starlink. So that's the kind of shit that he could do. And also, even now with the IPO, he's like demanding that the banks that are part of the IPO buy Grok. Okay, I mean, look, when IPOs happen, there's a lot of wheeling and dealing and stuff like that. So I'm not going to say that's out of bounds. That's fine. But like, my point is, how far will they go? But anyway, this particular L is on the fact that there seems to be, I don't want to say fraud, but it could be, I want to say maybe some kind of, even the word manipulation feels a little strong. It feels like we're being lied to. Let's put it that way.
Gaslit?
Worse than that, because it's more intentional, right?
Yeah.
SpaceX reported revenue of $16 billion and about $8 billion in earnings in 2025. That is what they put in their IPO filing. Okay, that's
$8 billion in pure profit.
Yeah, it was reported as earnings, but sometimes people conflate earnings with free cash flow or whatever. We don't really know. Like, actual profit would be taxable, so there might be actually less than that, but it may be like free cash flow. I'm not sure, but it was reported as earnings. Okay, which is a pretty high profit margin. But here's the thing. The XAI merger with SpaceX happened in February, and XAI was reported by some outlets to be estimated to be losing up to $1 billion a month because it's an AI company with mega compute costs. Elon built the Colossus data center, I think in Tennessee, and it's just a money pit, right? It may be estimated to have $1 to $2 billion in revenue. That is not in the filing. If that were in the filing, SpaceX would be at best break even, like no profit. At worst, even losing money. And now so they're reporting 2025 numbers in their IPO filing. In February, they merged XAI into SpaceX, which happened over the course of like a week. It was a very, very quick merger for a $250 billion company. I mean, it was really quick. And now they're planning to do their IPO in June. And because of what I talked about, where they have forced through rule changes on the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 that the SEC approved, they are going to immediately, without any earnings reports, usually you have to wait 12 months to get into S&P 500 or the NASDAQ 100, they're going to be immediately put onto those lists. And the problem is, I don't think that investors in the markets have all the details. I pieced it together from the timeline. And to me, just my opinion, it sounds deliberate. It seems like this is a deliberate way to obfuscate their real earnings, to protect XAI from running out of money by putting it, this manure pile into an actual moneymaker, which is SpaceX, and to basically hide that from the public, while in the meantime, getting the benefits of being forced onto the NASDAQ 100 and the S&P 500. It could double the stock based on the mechanics of it, because they're only floating a tiny percentage. And all these passive index funds, about $25 trillion of passive index funds, will be forced to buy a tiny amount of float that has a multiplier attached to it. So it basically weights higher in those indices, which means they have to buy more of it. All of that means that I think what's going to happen is this won't be revealed until they do their next earnings probably in September, the end of September. But during that time, they're going to try to get the numbers as high as possible. I noted that I bought Starlink. I didn't get it yet, but they're running like seriously steep promotions on Starlink. They used to charge for the equipment, and then it was kind of like a rental or whatever. Now they're not charging for that. Plus they're offering 3 months of like a discounted rate on the internet fee. So I can see through their public actions that they're doing a lot of things to drum up money. Now, that could just be business as usual. I don't think so. Unless somebody can tell me where I'm wrong here. I think this seems deliberate and almost like fraud. We think, Martin, where's your investigative journalist hat? Don't you want to know?
Deliberate fraud to accomplish what exactly?
Well, if they had reported that actually after the merger of SpaceX and XAI were actually not profitable or actually not making any money, then what would happen to the IPO price? It wouldn't be $2 trillion. It may not even be $1 trillion. If I was selling you hogwash, right, and I told you that we had $1 million in profit and actually we had $0, doesn't that change what you're willing to pay for it?
No, of course.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on.
Okay.
Yeah, these fuckers. They've reported only 2025 numbers, which doesn't include XAI. If it did include XAI, there's no way it would have $8 billion of earnings. Even if my numbers are off, it would not be that high. It's not possible.
And the $2 trillion valuation would come down to some much lower number.
Exactly. That's what makes it almost fraudulent, I want to say.
Okay.
So,
all right. I guess we're gonna have something to talk about in the future when this happens.
We'll see.
Look into the details later. Okay, final L of the week. The New Yorker, and specifically Ronan Farrow, did a
and Andrew Morantz. Yes, both of them.
Thank you. Yeah, did a long investigative story on the life and times of Sam Altman of OpenAI, and it's not a flattering picture. In fact, I think they used the term, and also some of his coworkers or ex-coworkers, called him, quote, a pathological liar. Do I have that right?
That's right. Yeah. So this was really interesting because this was based on interviews with over 100 people with firsthand knowledge of how Sam Altman conducts business. And it also looked at the previously undisclosed Ilya memos, which was the memos of Ilya Sutskever, who was the chief scientist of OpenAI and on the board, and also Dario Modi's private notes. As we know, he left OpenAI. And basically, the essence of it is that in 2023, Sam Altman was fired from OpenAI as a CEO.
Yeah.
And it was led by Ilya Sutskever, who had written these memos about him to other board members, basically saying that he shows a consistent pattern of lying, which is one of the first items that he laid out.
Yeah.
And a current OpenAI board member actually called him a sociopath, saying to the New Yorker, he has two traits that are almost never seen in the same person. The first is a strong desire to please people, to be liked in any given interaction. The second is almost a sociopathic lack of concern for the consequences that may come from deceiving others. So,
wow.
Okay, so here's what's interesting about this is when he was fired, it wasn't like, it was such a weird thing from the outside looking in, because he was fired and there didn't seem to be any reason behind it. It was just like he was fired. Like at that time, OpenAI was, on its way to becoming one of the fastest growing companies in the world, which it still is, but like it was especially at that time.
Yeah.
And he was fired. And at the same time, they were starting to make their moves to try to move from like a nonprofit to like a kind of like for-profit company, right? And so they had Microsoft investing in them. They had Thrive Capital, which is Jared Kushner's venture capital firm, investing in them. And basically, this is my take on what happened when he was fired.
It didn't last long. Didn't the board basically say you have to put him back as CEO or all hell will break loose?
Yeah, exactly. So it was just so weird the way he was fired, because it just like happened. We were like, why? Everyone was like, why? And that's exactly what the reaction of Jared Kushner and Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, were like, why? Like, was there sexual harassment? Was he have an inappropriate relationship with an employee? Like, what happened? That normally those are like the reasons a CEO of a prominent company would be fired. And here's what I think happened. The board, OpenAI board, didn't just want to come out and say, so first of all, you have these two competing forces. One is the people who were at OpenAI when it was formed as a nonprofit, which included Elon Musk. And then the people who are like the business people who are like, fuck this nonprofit shit. We're going to make this a fucking, trillion-dollar company. Yeah. And I think it was a tug of war between them. The board didn't want to come out and just say, okay, look, Sam Altman's a sociopath, because you don't want to smear someone's name. I think that's what happened. Like, they didn't want to say that and then get sued, into oblivion, right? So they didn't say anything, which left people to just speculate. And of course, Satya Nadella and Jared Kushner were like, what the fuck? So then Jared Kushner was like, listen, we're not going to close our round of funding with these guys unless he's put back as CEO. And that essentially forced all the board members to like resign, and except for one, actually. That's what happened. But it's kind of, I guess it's it's an L for obvious reasons, but it also, I feel like kind of there's a lot of evidence that kind of points to this kind of behavior. And I just feel like the last thing that the tech world needs is another leader of a $1 trillion company acting with complete disregard to consequences of how their technology is used in the world. And that's why I love Anthropic. And our feel-good story of the week is that Anthropic's revenue run rate is now $30 billion a year, which is almost double from where they were just at the end of last year.
What is a run rate?
Simple. You just take the last month's revenue and you basically just multiply it by 12. There's no guarantee that you're going to see that, but if you
it's a prediction based on your last month's earnings.
Yeah. If you're a growing company and it's not like seasonal or something, you could pretty much claim that. Like we're now seeing like basically a 12-month projection of $30 billion, which is more than OpenAI, who's recently said that they are at $24 billion. So Anthropic has lapped OpenAI in terms of revenue. And given that they actually have presented themselves as the good guys, and that might change. We don't know. Power corrupts, yada, yada, yada. Who the fuck knows, right? But if I had a choice, even if all things were equal, which they're not, OpenAI is valued at way higher of a multiple than Anthropic is. Their last funding round, Anthropic was like, I think, 350 billion.
Is that because they have more paying users, like monthly subscribers, or why? First mover advantage in some sense?
Look, the venture capital game is such a crapshoot, like, because you got to remember, they get paid out no matter what. Like, they have these, preferred returns and all these things. So it's not like they're not necessarily looking at it from like, what the valuation is all the time, right? They are and they aren't. It's like part of the equation. They need a place to deploy capital, and if that's an opportunity that's open to them, they're probably going to do it. But still, though, like, whatever they go public at is going to be a function of whatever their last valuation was at, because it has to be more than that, or else investors are not going to be down with it, right? But even all of that aside, if I was going to pick where to invest my money right now, I think it's a no-brainer. Anthropic is the one. It's for a company you feel good about supporting. You want them to win the AI wars, and they've conducted themselves with integrity, which is like, honestly,
it's a huge one. Yeah,
I'm like, integrity. That's a thing that, I've basically, over the last 5 or 6 years, I've just taken the position that business leaders, I don't expect them to act with integrity. I expect regulators and elected officials to do their job.
But their job is to keep these people in check, essentially. Like, you're the zookeeper that makes sure the tiger doesn't let loose in the zoo and just rip people's heads off.
Put guardrails around capitalism. That's all we ask for. Yeah. Everyone knows capitalism needs guardrails. Everyone knows that that's the only way it can work. Otherwise, you get a trillionaire like Elon Musk. So, that's my win of the week. That's my feel-good story of the week. How are you feeling, Martin?
I feel good about it. I also just wish that Anthropic didn't ban both of my accounts that I tried making to use Claude. I got kicked off their platform twice for literally no reason. So I would want them to take me as a paying customer, because I'm happy to give them $20 a month. But right now they're not letting it happen. So
damn, bro.
Yeah. And I really don't know why. The only thing that I did, I made one account. I paid $20 to get the monthly paid tier, and used it to edit some text for a couple of things that I was writing. And then a day later, I got an email saying my account was suspended and my $20 had been refunded. And then a couple of weeks later, I did it again. I used a different email address to sign up, used it again for some text editing, and then same thing happened. I got suspended and my monthly payment refunded, and no appeals have led anywhere. So I have no idea why.
That's one of the things I fucking hate about these giant tech platforms. They can't do customer service at scale, or they don't want to. Yeah. And so you end up in this, like, people get screwed. Like, here's my issue with that. As Anthropic becomes a tool that you must use to get by in life, much like Google is, right? Yeah. Imagine not being able to use Google. Imagine owning a business and you can't use Google. It's just not possible. And that is such unfair power that they have. Yeah. And instead of making the proper investments, which again, this is where regulation comes in, instead of making the proper investments into customer service, where you could actually talk to a person about your issues, they treat you like you're basically worthless to them.
Put fucking mythos on it. Put mythos to figure out why I was kicked off Claude twice for no reason.
Yeah, so that man, you had to ruin it, man. We were. It was a feel good moment.
I'm sorry. I want to be a paying customer. I stopped paying OpenAI. I canceled my ChatGPT subscription.
I would go to Gemini if I were you.
I'm on Gemini. I pay for Gemini. I get the 5 terabyte storage, all that. But I want to fiddle around with Claude. And
man, you did bring in your total drama into this shit. Now we're all fun. Now I'm in a bad mood. I feel hit someone. I want to yell at. I want to take everything back. I said no. I hope you get it resolved. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help, or if anyone else can help or knows how to do it.
Anyone.
I think we should close out.
Hit me up.
I think we should close out the episode. I feel like we're gonna.
This was good.
Risk getting negative again.
This was good. Let's cut it there. Thank you for checking out Hogwash. You can find us on social media at HogwashPod, on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else. And if you have any feedback, we'd love to hear from you. And you can email us at hogwashpod@gmail.com. Do I have that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And by the way, as of now, we're at 150 YouTube subscribers, which I know you're probably thinking, wow, whoop-de-fucking-do. Hey, we were at like 20 like 2 or 3 weeks ago, okay? Like, this
to the moon,
great
baby.
progress. Yes, to the moon.
Yeah.
We love you guys. Let us know if you have any feedback, and we'll see you in a couple of days. We're going to be doing 2 episodes this week.
All right. Bye.